Well, the boat is all sanded out, wetted out, and sanded out again. And, you know, one of the benefits of doing this for the last couple of decades and hearing customers come back and say, how'd you do this, how'd you do that, is when we do new DVDs, we can actually incorporate all that stuff. So I'm going to talk a little bit about sanding the inside of the boat. Now, wood is wood, sandpaper is sandpaper, so the end objective is still the same, but there are a few tips that I can give you that'll help you out quite a bit. The most important is you got a curved hull, right? And this by far is going to be the most popular sander that people are going to use. Now the key is, if I've got a curved hull and I put my sander on my curved hull, you can see it doesn't really contact in the middle, so I have to keep rubbing up and down, rubbing up and down, rubbing up and down. And what tends to happen is people will make a gully, in effect, on both ends. So what I want you to remember is if I have a curved hull like this, and I put it on here like this, all I have to do is rock my sander forward, and it'll make really, really good contact there. And of course, just like on the outside of the boat, you know, we hook up our vacuum attachment to it. That keeps, you know, our significant others happy, so we're not kicking dust all over the place. But more importantly, you know, I got these big Popeye arms here in the front, but a lot of people have a hard time holding a sander. This is probably about, I don't know, 6-7 pounds or something, for long periods of time in a vertical position. What I like to do is grab it around the throat, right there, right? And it somehow balances it better, makes it easier for me to handle, so that I can just move it around. So you may want to consider that, especially if you get cramped up in your hands. All right, the other thing you should think of is sometimes it's better to attack it from the top as opposed to coming up from the bottom. Right? Because you don't want to, if you keep coming up from the bottom, you're going to keep hitting the same spot. You don't want to do that either. All right? So rock it forward, come down from the top as well as the bottom, and also remember that you can pivot your sander so that you're getting a better angle on things. So if you do some of those things in combination, if you rock it forward, that makes it easier to come up and down. You just have to change how much you're rocking it as you do the concave. Right? All right, that's step one. So again, it's 80 grit with that. Give it all a rough sanding, do all your fillers, come back with another 80 grit, sand it out, and get it all looking like this. And then you're gonna have to come back and do some fine tuning. All right, so fine tuning, I love this thing, and these things are not easy to find, but if you can find one, pick one of these up. Essentially, this is the exact same shape as this. It uses hook and loop. There we go. So we're using the same sandpaper that we would use on this. It's nice and comfortable for the hand, and when I do, and I don't want to do too much because I got the fiberglass cloth in here, but essentially just go up and down the sides. Now this is 150 grit paper. This is the last sanding that I'm going to do before I go ahead and put my fiberglass on there. Sticky back paper, if you can find it, it's a wonderful thing. I'd make little slices on it, and then I use my fingers. My fingers stick right to it, and then I can take my fingers and get up into corners. Real handy. And of course, these you should be able to find almost anywhere. This one's made by Stanley. And it allows you to get in up on the sides of the stem pieces really well, and up into the inner parts of the stem. You can slide your hands up there without banging your knuckles. Really handy. And of course, yet another thing we can use our cool tool for, right? These things are just wonderful. I'm so glad they've come down in price so that everybody can afford them now. And you should really, there's so many things on the boat that you can use this for, that if you're a guy like me and you're just like buying tools, this is a great one to have, all right? Okay, so I'm gonna put all this away so that we can roll out some fiberglass cloth and get started with this process. All right, so really the only trick to getting the cloth to lay down in there is you want to get out all the wrinkles that you can. Again, always start in the center, work your way up and out, right? Even just like it was on the bottom, up and out. But you want to leave it slack. You don't want to be able to push down anywhere in the cloth and feel space underneath. So, you know, take what you need, make it slack, put it right down against the wood, and I just use these spring clamps to temporarily hold them in place. Now, I am about that much, about 9 inches up the stems in either direction. And you're going to find, if you've done some of our canoes and you've used those DVDs before, this is just going to be a whole lot easier doing it this way. And it's not going to make any difference in the finished product. So I have everything pretty much the exact way that I want it, and I'm just going to mix up some clear epoxy and we'll get started. It's a beautiful 70-degree day, so it's perfect perfect weather for doing this. Not too hot, not too cool. I'm just mixing up 6 ounces at a time. And I'll just go back and mix more when I need it. Great part about doing the inside of the boat is you don't have to really fuss much about where you're pouring it. So I'm just going to get it out of the cup and onto the boat. And then we just got to spread it around. Take the spring clamp, move it out of my way, and the same as on the outside. We're just going to go back and forth. Same motion that we used on the outside of the boat. Always starting in the middle, working your way up and out. So one of the great parts about working in pieces here in the interior is there really is no pressure. So I'm just going to keep continuing to do this, and there's really no reason for me to keep yapping while I'm doing it. There's really nothing special at this point. The only thing I would say is when you get to certain points, the clamps come off and you're going to come back and you're going to trim all this, right? So right now the clamps are helping to hold it all up in place. But they're going to be in the way, and it's going to cause this bulge going around the corner here. So as I work my way up to the sides, clamps come off, just take some scissors and snip it right down, and then just continue on both sides. So let's just finish this up till we get to the edges, and then I'll show you what to do there. So it's time for me to do a little bit of cutting. This is going really well. And before I cut, I'm going to make sure I got a little bit of extra bunched up down in here. So I don't want to come up short up here, right? I can always pull a little bit back. And I'm just going to make sure everything is plentiful. And go ahead and start snipping right along the hull. Now I would suggest you don't use your best scissors for this, because once you get epoxy on them, it's a son of a gun to get them sharpened again. And you want to get it up, right up nice and close to that hull. All right, so we've done a couple of things since the last time we were together, which for you was just seconds ago. Is we've gone ahead and done the other stem, and the reason for that is I wanted to show you what the ultimate outcome was supposed to be after we show you how to do this side. So all I'm doing now is all the sharp edges where the fiberglass came up here, you got to get rid of those. Just a little bit of 80 grit stuck to my fingers here to get rid of that. Any place where the old fiberglass is up high, just give that a little scuffing. And once you're happy, then we can start to put this glass on. So again, make sure all this is nice and smoothed out, any high spots are out. Be careful, again, just like the edges here, it's gonna be sharp, so get rid of it as soon as possible. And you notice that we already did get rid of the edge cloth here because I knew I would cut myself. All right, so we are pretty much ready to go here. I'm just gonna get the broom and clean this out. Before I do that, we'll go ahead and cut this cloth. So I've got a piece of scrap here. And you're gonna have, building a boat like this, you're probably gonna have a lot of scrap left over. So don't touch the new cloth unless you absolutely have to, because it's always your fallback. If you got a big piece of scrap, go ahead and use it. And one of the great parts about working this way in sections is there's just no pressure at all. All right, so I've got this piece here pretty much laid flat in there. I'll put my eyes on. I always start by getting rid of the stuff on the ends here and just leaving it about an inch or so over the top. That way there, it's not hanging over, you know, causing it to pull. And then the idea here is if we do this absolutely right, we won't have to put any pieces going across here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this cloth on the inside corner here But as I get down here where it starts to transition and the actual inner stem gets higher, I'm gonna move to the center point of that inner stem and finish cutting it right down. So let me show you how I'm gonna do that. One of your favorite tools in this process, if you can get one, you can use scissors if that's all you got, but these things here, this is a rotary razor blade. And you can get these at sewing centers. And all it is a razor, careful, sharp, that's in a circle. People who do quilting use them all the time. You can probably get them at craft centers. I'm sure you can get them at Amazon if you don't have any of that near you. All right, so you just take that razor, starting on the inside corner here. I'm gonna roll right down. And as I get down here towards where the stem gets high, I'm gonna move in to the middle of the stem and continue to cut right down the middle of the stem. There. Now, when you grab it gently because there's going to be a couple of threads here and there. So I'll start by cutting off the end here and making sure that it drapes and falls right around the end of the stem. Yeah. And then up here, I'll gently pull it over the top and get right up here at the top of it. There you go. So you can see that that little rotary razor makes everything a whole lot easier. All right, so now in order for it to not pull, I'm going to cut on the side here, leaving about 1 inch of hangover, because I can come back and trim that later, and I don't want to short cheat myself here. I'll just cut that off. All right, so there's one side. All right, so in order to do this side, I want to make sure that I don't lose what I've already done here. So I'm just going to take some clamps, stick them up there. And that'll allow me to roll this back out of my way. But what I want you to notice is you can see right here the transition where we go from the middle of the stem over to the side. If I do this one exactly the same way, I'll be tying it real nice going across the boat there. So let me just gently roll this back out of the way. And we'll drop this in. Until I get right down here, I'm going to come up onto the inner stem and run right down the middle again. Okay. And when I get down here, make life easier on myself and just grab some scissors. Finish that off so I don't cut into the boat down here. Okay, now I'm going to cut this straight here and then take a little bit off the edge here. So again, you don't want to get too close to the top there because you just don't want to shortchange yourself. Be careful to hold the salvage here so it's not pulling down on you. Yeah. Okay. Now the last thing I'm going to do is make a nice neat line here. Alright, and the only other thing to do here before we're ready to mix some epoxy is to make sure right here at this transition, you can't have that corner there because it just won't like it. So give it a little snip. And that'll go up nice and even there. This will come right around the front. That one will overlap it, everything will be happy. Okay, so now we gotta check and just make sure we didn't leave too much up top there, and I don't think we did. Everything should fold in okay. I might take a little bit off here. Now I should be able to fold this back down, and you can see that from here up, I've got a lap, which is perfect. So now, if I do this right and it comes out nice and neat, I don't have to put pieces going across because it'll already be tied in together. All right, so I'm just gonna take a little bit more off this end here because all that sticking up is gonna be a problem when I try to push it down into the corner. Not too much. It's okay if it sticks up 1/4 of an inch or so, but you don't want it sticking up this much. This is almost an inch. Take out a little bit of that excess. And that should lap right across. And it does. All right, that's it. I'm gonna mix up some epoxy and we're gonna put these in place. Now what I generally do here is I'll start up here and do a pour down, which will get that rolling for me. Not too much, just enough so that it goes down and starts to do its thing. And then I will make a pour here and try to get it close to the top, because at this point the primary goal is to get one side stationary and in place. And we can do that not by doing a perfect fiberglass job, but just getting it wet enough so that it doesn't move around on us. That's the goal. Places here where the cloth overlaps, you want to try to do a little pour on top, because when you try to drag it over the top, you get into trouble. Sometimes it starts moving around on you. Well, that's about all there is to that. As you can see, a lot of work with the hands here. So here's the things to look out for. Primarily, you know, you're trying to keep it so that when you come back, you have to do as little sanding as possible, especially in these places where it's going to be difficult to sand, because remember, epoxy is a lot harder than wood. All right, so all these places where it overlaps all the way down, even where there's, you know, little bunches of cloth, as long as it lies flat, you're fine. Leave it alone. It's going to be plenty strong. These places where it transitions up, going from the side of the stem piece to the flat part, just make sure that they protrude nice and high, so that when it does come time to push that down, it's an easy thing to do. You want to make sure all along the sides of your stem piece here, there are no dry spots, right? So what that will mean for you is when you come to trim it all off, you won't have dry cloth going down the side of the stems, which would be a problem, because then you have to go back with a razor blade, cut that all out, sand it down smooth. So you want to have your fiberglass going right up the side, nice and smooth. And I guess the last thing I would say is don't be in a hurry to leave, because one of the problems that might happen if you take off too quickly is you still got a lot of resin riding down here, right? So until it starts to thicken up and harden, until that thermal reaction starts to happen, it's going to continue to run. So what could happen, and it's happened to me before when I leave too early, is you end up with a little pool down at the end of your stem because it all just ran down there and I didn't stick around long enough to take care of that. So I am taking care of that right now, working the excess in and down and all around to make sure that when I'm done, it's done. All right, so as you can see, I still got some pools in here, so now I'm going to go back with my spatulas and clean this all up. And that will be the end of this job. Okay, so as promised, I'm going to show you the outcome, what it's supposed to look like here. As I hope you can see clearly in the camera, this fiberglass going up the side, that's a weapon. That's a weapon. We're just ready to get you. And I've said it before, I'll say it again because it bears repeating, nothing is worse than a fiberglass splinter. Just seems to hurt 10 times more and be 10 times more difficult to get out of your hand than a wood splinter. Okay, so before you do anything, don't run your fingers on it to see it's dry. Don't do any of that. Assume it's dry. If you touch up here, it's dry. Okay, take your scraper or your rasp and get rid of it. And the best way to get it off the sides here is to run at an angle, run at a 45. Okay, you're gonna be tempted to run your fingers down it. Don't do it. I'm gonna get myself a brush here, push everything out of the way, and then take sandpaper, run it down the edges. And I got a little X-Acto knife here, a razor knife. And where it comes up the end of the stem, I'm just going to cut that out. Just take your time, come around it. You can pull it right out. Okay. Sandpaper. Get a little bit of a scrub in there just to get those sharp edges down. Okay. So what did we just manage to do? Well, we just managed to do about 90% of the cleanup in about 3 minutes flat. The reason for that is because we planned out our cutting and we did everything in advance so that we knew everything was going to lie flat, right? So now I don't have anything, I don't have to do anything cross from one side to the other. I've got good connection from one side to the other all the way down to here, and then the stem takes it from there. And if you were paying attention, you saw down here at the end of the stem, I overlap this way, I overlap this way, I come up the end of the stem by about an inch or so with 2 pieces of cloth. Everything is nice and tight and fits really well. All right, don't forget to cut the ends up here. Okay, last warning, and this goes for the entire inside of the kayak or canoe or whatever else it is you're fiberglassing, mostly for the kayak. We've already shaped the sides of these kayaks, right? We shaped it when we had the shear clamp in there, and we took our block plane and we made everything so that the deck is gonna go up and nice. You know, we've already done all that. It is easy to get messy when you're fiberglassing up the sides to let it roll over onto the top. Try really hard not to do that. If it happens and you get fiberglass coming up over the top, be cognizant of the fact that you need to get back to the exact same shape that you were in order for your lid to fit on it, in order for your deck to fit back on there correctly, right? So you can't just take a sander and start powering down on that thing, or else you'll end up with gaps, you know, along your deck. So if for some reason epoxy does get up over the side, just very lightly. Be really patient, real light. Take it down till it's gone. No power tools, fingers, small hand tools. You know, use a little bit of this, a little bit of elbow grease, but absolutely do not take a power tool, or else you'll ruin that nice line that you put all that work into. Okay, looks great. Once that other side is dry, we're gonna come back in, trim all that out. We're gonna come back in and put our shear clamp back in, because then we can start talking about bulkheads. All right, she's looking good.